Now, it's been a packed weekend full of political activities, and we will unpack it all. But let's begin with the governing MPP, whose newly launched manifesto has got people talking. The party has in its manifesto pledged to develop the nation, but concerns are already emerging regarding the feasibility and sustainability of the projects mentioned. Let's start off with the National Rental Assistance Scheme, where the Vice President, Dr. Bawumia, said government will be looking to provide low-interest loans to eligible Ghanaians to enable them pay rent advance.
Three components of our housing policy. It is clear that there are a lot of youth who, when they finish school, just trying to rent accommodation is a big problem. And why is it? The large demands for rent allowance, sometimes up to 2 years demand. But someone who is finished school and just starting a job doesn't have those savings to pay all these huge demands for rent allowance. The landlords, on the other hand, have gotten used to asking, even though the law says 6 months, they've gotten used to asking for 2 years and insist on it because they are saying that they don't know if the tenant will run away or not, so they want to collect it up front. So there is a market failure. There's a market failure between what the tenants want and what the landlords want. And this is why government has decided to come in and bridge this market failure by setting up a national rental assistance scheme. And under this scheme, if you have a job and we can deduct regularly from your income, under this scheme, the National Rent Assistance Scheme will give you a loan to pay your rent allowance. But we are paying this not to you, but to the landlord. And then we will deduct monthly as you would normally pay. So we are bridging this. You need to have a formal employment, which will allow us, or guarantee, someone who will guarantee so that you can pay. But it is very, very important that we address this, and we are going to be putting in place 100 million Ghana cedis for the National Rental Assistance Scheme and work with the private sector to crowd in more so that we can get this done and relieve a lot of people who are renting of the burden. We are also going to digitize the National Rent Control Board, and a new law which has been coming to cabinet will also pass a new Rent Control Act to become modern with our times. So we are doing the rental housing. Then we are going to focus next on low-income housing through the land banks that we have already gotten together. We are going to build housing estates because the focus, a lot of people in the low-income category cannot really buy many of the affordable homes that are being built. But if you have low-income housing, they can rent or they can rent to own, and that will provide a lot of low-income people access.
Now, a lot of you have been reacting to this announcement, and many of you say enforcement of the existing rent laws is a better option than introducing a new policy that will swallow prospective beneficiaries in debt.
Just on the issue of rent, I have a very huge issue with that because I don't think that young people need loans to be able to pay for rent. They only need an effective system to be able to pay for rent on their own. And imagine that if I have to pay rent of 100 Ghana cedis a month and you give me 6 months, which is just 600 cedis, even as a national service personnel, I should be able to afford that. But if landlords are asking me to pay 1 year, 2 years in advance, then it becomes a problem. So what I think the government should have thought of should have been to fully implement the Rent Act that allows for people to pay just 6 months of rent in advance. And I think that if we do something like that, then we wouldn't need to institute any loans for anybody. Because if you give me a loan, how do I even pay back?
Manifesto, MPP had presented a very fantastic manifesto overall. But when it comes to sport, what they said they would do in 2016, what they did over the course of the effort that we gave them was not really pleasing. and then you come back to access for the mandate to do something else in sport after you've not even finished what you've accessed to give it a mandate, then you will do. It shows that the MPP government has little or no respect for sports. And as every growing economy, if you neglect the sporting sector of the economy, that economy fails. And we give you in the year 2010, even Gov't was able to give Australia $2 billion in fundings, which means that when government turns their attention to the sport, we could be raising serious capital instead of debts.
But the government promised to build national theatres across the 10 regions at that time. And as of now, we don't know where the theatres are even situated. They also mentioned, I saw in the manifesto, I've taken my time to look at some of the highlights, and they talk about the Koforidia one which they're building. For me, I was expecting them to revamp some of the old existing ones which has already been there. For instance, you go to Kumasi, when you go to Kumasi Cultural Center, there's a cultural center there which has been dictated for a long while. So I was expecting government to probably revamp those sectors so as to boost the tourism and creative arts industry.
For the central region.
Well, I think we need an airport in every regional capital, if you ask me, because if I'm traveling to the United States of America, I may not want to land at JFK. I probably want to go to Boston Logan Airport. So every region should at least have an airport. It all adds up to the infrastructural development of our country. But then first things first, is it a priority is a question we should be asking. If it's not, I don't think what we need is a thing of no guarantees. What we need as students is expedite processing so we can get access, to the loans as and when we need them. You don't wait for me to go to school and, you give me the loan at the end of the semester or in the middle of the semester when I've already been denied writing some ISO exam. So we need expedite processing, and we would also prefer that the body responsible for this should deal directly with the schools so the students do not have to suffer. So at the end of the day, if I know that I depend on a loan to pay my fees, the school should deal, or the government should deal directly with the school and say, you know what, these are the students on our list, allow them write exam, and we will pay the monies directly to you. So
now, we will be joined in the studio shortly by Emmanuel Hovek-Posu, PRO of the Rent Control Department, for some discussions on their operations. But first, let's hear from the National Tenants Union. Its General Secretary, Frederick Opoku, joins me on the phone. Mr. Opoku, what's your reaction to this provision in the MPP's manifesto?
Thank you very much, my brother. I think it is brilliant. I think it is it's long overdue that such things were expected. And I think, certainly, the direction that the MPP government, and for that matter, the manifesto has printed, is an excellent one that we, the Tenants Union of Ghana, are very happy with. Now, it is saying something and doing it. It's two different things altogether. But I'm pretty sure, and I think, that President Akufo-Addo, as we have known him to be, he would by all means honor his word. And that would be very excellent work to do. To go into it, it is very clear that Ghanaian tenants are facing huge challenge with respect to tenancy issues. And that, I believe, we can do something about it. So we are so much happy about the announcement of the direction that MPP government has taken with the issue. We should walk the talk. That is what we are very much interested with.
Now, we know that the Rent Control Bill, which is currently on the floor of Parliament, stipulates that rent can only be charged, rent advance can only be charged for 6 months. And this would only apply to those landlords who want to charge up to 6 months rent advance. Does that not mean that many landlords who do not want to obey the law would just ignore this rental assistance fund?
You see, I was happy. I think the party, MPP, was somehow clever in a sense that they actually came out to say that they really want to review the rent law. This rent law is not up to modernity. It's obsolete. It's dead. It's a cake. And for that reason, landlords are taking the leeway because of the loopholes in the law. Now, Article 25, Subsection 5 of the law, it will clearly that landlords are forbidden, to charge more than 6 months. What happens if they charge? Nothing, because the rent control has become a toothless bulldog. A toothless bulldog in the sense that the law is not working. They take one side of the law of certain justice, but they can't bite because they are talking about now tenancy is about free market. If you build, you can charge whatever you can. And if you connect to maybe the rent control, their hands are tied. And then expect that government should go into what we call the social housing. Social housing are housing for the poor, for the aged, and those who are old. Government has to contribute directly into building social housing. For me, I don't agree one bit with this kind of affordable housing matter. If what is affordable to you might not be affordable to me. So it is relative. Therefore, why do you say that we are talking about affordable housing? So for bills, Mahama came, we continue. What has happened? Some are languishing there. Nothing has happened. They could have converted it. Then they should use that one as an experiment in respect to what they want to do. So if you want to help, if you are bringing a pro-poor policy, it is fair and nice, excellent, to try as much as possible for the government to invest in this. Now, in the law, it has taken us almost about 40 years to have a national housing policy. It was launched in 2015. My brother, ask, why has it not been implemented so far? What is happening?
So Frederick, I understand that you have some challenges with the structure of our law currently, but the question really was that, is this feasible? Would it really serve the purpose it was meant to? Because it only limits landlords who want to register with the scheme, if you read the fine print of the manifesto, and that's landlords who would agree to take in 6 months rent advance in the current scheme of things.
I disagree with it entirely from that angle. This is because if you're talking about a landlord who register and for them you pay through them, there are a number of Ghanaians who wouldn't benefit from this policy. They wouldn't. They might maybe going forward, they will try to probably figure it out. But as it stands, I bet to differ. If majority of Ghanaians who are not in the informal sector will benefit anyway. Because you are paying the thing, at the end of the month, you pay or you deduct it from their money. What about those, the informal sector? They must come clear to tell us if really they have an open policy whereby in future or as they move on, they will integrate the poorest of the poor in the community to benefit.
Right.
So that's what I think. Yes, sure. If not that, then it will be a misleading agenda or priority. And for that reason, they have to revise their notes.
Frederick Opoku, thank you very much for joining us. He's the Secretary General for the National Tenants Union. Now, let's listen to this news desk report, which chronicles the various promises that were made during the manifesto launch.
2024 years for Nana.
In 216 pages, the MPP tells the story of how it intends to do more for Ghanaians as it touted its achievements, particularly in the economic and energy sectors over the last 3.5 years. The party, which has been riding on the back of the success of its flagship free SHS policy, is promising to provide wireless internet connection at all senior high schools, universities, and colleges of education across the country.
We will also complete the provision of free Wi-Fi at all senior secondary schools and public tertiary institutions. The process has started. A contract has already been awarded, and ECG is also leveraging its fiber network across the country. And even before the end of this year, we will be starting from the ECG perspective on the tertiary institutions.
Major infrastructure pledges in the document include a new harbour and an airport to be built in Cape Coast.
For the people of Cape Coast, I have good news for you. We are building a new harbour in Cape Coast and a new airport in Cape Coast. It is very critical that we do that. An airport makes a lot of sense in Cape Coast.
2 new psychiatric hospitals will be constructed, with 111 district and regional hospitals to be built across Ghana.
We have Agenda 111, which used to be Agenda 88. We're going to build district hospitals wherever they are none, 102 in all, 2 additional psychiatric hospitals, and 7 regional hospitals.
On governance, the MPP makes a commitment to its pledge of making district chief executives elected on partisan basis. This pledge was abandoned by the government following concerns by civil society organizations. The party says it will continue to finance anti-corruption agencies to deliver on their mandate. In the housing sector, the MPP is promising to set up a national rental assistance scheme in collaboration with the private sector.
If you have a job and we can deduct regularly from your income, under this scheme, the National Rent Assistance Scheme will give you a loan to pay your rent allowance. But we are paying this not to you, but to the landlord. And then we will deduct monthly as you would normally pay.
The MPP is further pledging to restructure the student loan scheme.
All tertiary students will now be able to get the option to obtain a student loan without the requirement of a guarantor.
In the end, the governing party's message is clear. It has already achieved a lot and is now counting on Ghanaians to re-elect them to do more.
You should vote for Nana so that he will provide the leadership of service to deliver on our promises, to protect our progress, to transform Ghana for all.
Now, with me now is Emmanuel Kosu. He's the PRO for the Rent Control Department, joining us to peruse these issues a bit further. And let me just set the stage that it's important for us to talk to rent control for two reasons. Number one, the MPP's manifesto states clearly that they'll be working in tandem with the Rent Control Department. Number two, this manifesto promise will be carried out in cognizance of the Rent Control Bill, which will become law, according to the MPP, very soon. But we want to understand how your office works, first of all. Okay. What happens at the Rent Control Department?
Okay. So basically, what happens at the Rent Control Department is we are being guided by the Rent Act, that is Act 220. And that Act mandates us, first of all, to make sure that we conduct an assessment. What is an assessment? An assessment is when you build your premises or your apartment and you want to dwell in. When you want to dwell in personally, no law inflicts on you. But when it comes to mind that I want to rent this apartment out or I want to make this apartment a commercial venture, then the first point of call is to call on the Rent Control Department, where we will come and then do an assessment. We will look at the structure, the materials you've used, and then based on that, we will give you an assessment certificate within which we will state how much you are supposed to charge or the rent you are supposed to inflate on that apartment. Secondly, the law or the act mandates us also that if an offense is committed, then we should investigate and then make recommendation to the magistrate, where the magistrate will implement, and then where there is sanction, the magistrate will do. We also have the right to implement or maintain two registers. The two registers are the vacant premise register and then prospective tenant register. The vacant premise register is a register where landlords who have vacant premises will come to our outfit, and then we put those information into our database. And then the second aspect is where people looking for an apartment or houses will come, and then when the two of them synchronize, then we'll call the landlord and call the prospective tenant, then we link them together. There's another aspect where we apply or implement somebody who has absconded from any premises. What is an abscondment? An abscondment is where you rent somebody's premises, your time is due, and then you lock the door or the premises with your belongings in that apartment. The landlord has no right to force open and then throw your things away. Okay. The landlord has to come to the Rent Control Department, make that complaint, where we follow due process, and then we get order from the court. Then the court will order us to force open. Okay. When we do force open, we list all the items there, give it to the landlord for safekeep for a certain period. If that period elapses, and then the person doesn't come, then the court will order us again as to what we should do with the item. So these are some of the activities that goes on. And then the overall issue is to make sure that landlords and tenants live in harmony. So we liaise, or we make sure that landlords and tenants, there is no dispute. If there is dispute, we come in between them and then reconcile. So these are some of the functions that we perform now.
Now, our laws currently state, Mr. Hosu, that you cannot pay for rent advance exceeding 6 months.
Exactly.
And that's where the naughty points comes in, because if you're talking about landlords and tenants living in harmony, I would wish my landlord would not take more than 6 months.
Yeah.
But in some cases, they would make those demands. So how do you enforce that law?
Okay. So we are enforcing that law. First of all, the implementation of the law is a collective responsibility. I'm saying this because if party A goes for rental and then the landlord demands more than 6 months and that party keeps quiet, and then party B goes because the party feels he has so much money and go and pay, then the two of them are not helping us. The law states that the landlord has no right to even demand more than 6 months if it's a long-term tenancy. And if it's a short-term tenancy, the landlord has no right to demand more than a month. So if you go and the landlord demands it, an offense has already been committed. Okay. It's your responsibility to report it to the rent control department for us to take the necessary action. But if you go and the person demands and you keep quiet, then you start searching for various and then you still keep quiet because of victimization or any other issue, then you are not helping us. So we are just pushing. What we are currently doing, when the landlord is brought before us and we realize the person has paid more than the necessary, we first caution the landlord. Secondly, if you come again, we just process you and then send you to court.
But so why caution the person when the law has already been broken?
You know what we are, the sensitization have gone on severally, but within this short period, just last 2 years coming, we've done massive sensitization. Though the law is there, as you rightly said, but we are using human face in an aspect. So now we are...
Is that not what is destroying the spirit of the law and enforcement of the law in Ghana?
Exactly. That's why I'm saying now what we are doing, when you come in first time, we caution you. We'll make sure that you don't repeat it. But if you want to be a recent person, if you want to repeat those offenses, then that's the point we just recommend to the magistrate for the implementation or the sanction or the dissent on the law. So that's what we are doing now. So we are calling on Ghanaians, especially tenants, prospective tenants. If you go to any landlord and it demands more than 6 months, quickly run to the rent control department. We have process involved. We'll just invite the landlord, and then where the law applies, we implement it.
How many housing units do you cover at the rent control office?
It will be difficult to answer this. What our mandate is on private houses. Yeah. When we come to metropolitan and government properties, it's beyond our mandate. What we focus on, or what the law mandates us to do, is to focus on private commercial housing.
Which is what I am curious about, because that's where the majority of Ghanaians are, you would agree?
Yes.
So do you know the number of units you want to cover? I'm asking this question because the mindset is that in enforcing a law like this, or in setting up something like a rental assistance scheme, you would need to have a significant section of the market involved before it's effective and people reap the benefit. So you want to know how much, what percentage would you say of the markets that you cover as rent control department?
We don't have that statistics. But let me clarify this national rental house assistance scheme. This is a scheme which, when they come into effect, a board will be set. It will not be necessary. It will not necessarily be under the rent control department. So let's understand this, that when it comes into effect, a board will be set. We are there as a rent control expert to implement or to advise on the technical aspect of it. If the government feels that it's the rent control department which has to administer this scheme, fair enough.
Of course, this is a political party's manifesto.
Exactly.
And so you can't speak to this. But I'm just reading a section of it. It says, as part of our interventions, we will implement the necessary regulatory, institutional, and operational reforms of the rent control department, including digitization of the operations, to enhance delivery and make it better able to serve the changing needs of market players, including landlords and tenants. And it says a new Rent Control Act has been drafted for review by Cabinet in this section. This is page 157 of the MPP's manifesto.
Okay. So there are different ingredients here. The scheme is separate from the new amendment act that is coming.
I'll let you finish. Okay. I'll let you finish. But we have been joined by a lecturer at the Kumasi Technical University, Dr. Smart Sapong, who has said that inadequate data on Ghana's housing rental scheme system is likely to hamper the implementation of the MPP's National Rental Assistance Scheme. Now, Dr. Sapong, it looks like you've been vindicated already, because I was trying to get some figures from the Rent Control Department, and unfortunately, they don't have as much data as we would have wanted to. This is really what we're talking about, wasn't it? Right, Dr. Smart Sapong. Yes, if you can hear me, Dr. Sapong, I just wanted to know what you thought about the inadequacy of data that we have in the rent control space.
Users like this come because you are not able to measure the size of the digit. So I think our system has actually failed us in respect of the way we do not.
Unfortunately, we're having a few challenges with Dr. Sapong's line. Dr. Sapong, if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, please restate your answer, because we lost quite a bit of it.
Sure, sorry about that. Didi, I was referring to how we wait till the reality knocks at our door before we look around for data. Our inability to manage the existing rent laws and to ensure the absence of data. We do not actually know where our landlords are. We do not have any traceable information about them. When tenants even wants to complain about some of these breach of the rent laws, they are nowhere to be found. The agents usually do stand in for landlords. The trace is not there, David, and in my, Daniel. And in my view, that is where the crux of the matter is. I want to see if we really mean to implement this plan. Amidst all the challenges that the landlords, citizens, and the interesting views that the general public have expressed about it, our concentration on that essential item called data. That essential item called data. And it is quite easy to do. I don't know why we find it difficult to do this.
How would data help us in implementing this policy? Practically, what are the first things that we can do with data?
Very well. So practically, the first things we supposed to do is to have the list of landlords and the address to their various residential purposes, or it was other use that has been converted to residential. Then it is even an initial breach, because this conversion should be with the permit of the rent control or the planners. Then we have tenants also seeking to get accommodation from these landlords, also properly registered, so that when there are any complaints, it can be traced directly to the one breaching the law. I'm not very sure landlords have a challenge with the 6 months rent as it is in the current law. But the fact is, if they should take 6 months, they feel they are unable to invest with it. And I don't think investment should be a basis for the breach. You go to rent control offices and they use other means other than strict enforcement, not because they don't want to enforce the law, but because the other side, the supply or the demand side, is also a challenge. So we can have a full grasp of the matter under discussion if we know the size of our problem.
Right.
Daniel, the 1.6 million deficit we keep talking about are estimates. We don't even know the distribution as to how many of them we need at a place, because it may not be evenly distributed. So let's put our eye on the data. Let's spend the first 6 months or the last 6 months we have, the 4 months or so to the end of the year, to clamp down on this challenge of data. What are the NAPCO guys doing? I hear somewhere last year, some were assigned to register properties and landlords and all these things. Can we have the report so that we can know the size of the problem we are discussing? Then its management can better be situated.
Dr. Sapon, thank you very much for bringing this perspective, but please stay with us for just a few more minutes. I will come back to you, sir, in studio and try and understand. The manifesto says that there will be reforms in the rent control department. Exactly. You have seen what the promise is. In fact, you seem to have an idea what it would even need.
Exactly.
What are those specific reforms that you need to enable you work?
Okay. So the digitization of the department is very key. The world is moving. So the digitization of the department is very key. Logistics broadly, in all aspects, is also very key. We are excited of this thing because if the implementation of the digitization is to come into effect, all our offices will have computers, all our offices will have data to work with. So these are some of the reforms that we want. You know, as a department, which is under the Ministry of Works and Housing, our mandate is to assist in the formulation and implementation of government policies. So we are ready. Whatever the policy may be, if it's feasible, we'll give our advice. If we give our advice and it comes to implementation.
How digitized are you now? How many computers do you have?
Oh, currently we have 54 offices. All the offices have computers. But what we are lacking is the data. I mean the internet connectivity. It's only few. If you come to only Accra and Kumasi, that's where we have those aspects. But the offices along the district, most of the district, don't have certain. So it makes communication very difficult. We have to use sometimes manual things to get what we want. So these are some of the few challenges that we're having. So we are excited. If this thing will come into effect, we will embrace it.
What's your budgetary allocation for 2019?
It is difficult to mention
to remember, to mention.
To mention this, yes.
But how much was released to you, to your office to work?
As of now, sorry, I can't say it. I can't say it. I've not checked from the account department. Yes.
Because you see, the challenge with a lot of these state offices is that they are not resourced to work.
Yeah.
And we understand whenever we come to the office and we have conversations with you, you tell us that, you know, we don't have the resources we need to work. We don't have the cars, we don't have the computers.
Exactly. Just as I've mentioned, logistics broadly is a challenge for the department. We are doing a lot with our limited resources. What we are doing, despite the fact that the government has promised to digitize the place, we've started doing something. We have 24-hour communication with our clients. If you send an email, within a short an hour, you get a response. What we want to do is somebody can sit in it or a home and then apply for a summon or something. This is the direction that we want to go.
Finally, and this will be my final question going to both of you.
Okay.
We heard the General Secretary of the National Tenants Union saying that the enforcement of the 6-month rent law is not practical because it's optional for the landlords to register in the scheme and limits themselves to 6 months. A lot of them will not. And so a large section of the market will not be covered. What do you think?
No, I disagree with him. Just as I started, the implementation of the law is a collective responsibility. So if a tenant, or the tenant association, will back with the rent control department in that when you are, as a tenant, you go in for a rent or a room, and the landlord demands more than 6 months, it's your right or responsibility to first of all report the landlord. So if you report
if he reports, you simply caution him, and he can say that he won't have the person as a tenant anymore.
No, let me put this fact down. Those with caution have not come back with the same offenses, which means the law is coming into effect, or which means people are abiding by it. So if you report and we don't do anything about it, that's where you point fingers at us. But you see,
if they've not come back, it does not mean that they are obeying the law.
No, the coming back means that they've not come back with the same offense. They've now started implementing or taking the 6 months. So you follow
up on them.
We follow up on them, exactly.
Right. Exactly. Thank you very much, Emmanuel Posu. I'm going to take a final word on this from Dr. Smart Sapong as well. Dr. Smart, where do you stand on this? We have the Rent Control Department saying that their offices are effective and they can help in the implementation of the Rent Control Act. But we have the National Tenants Union, the real users of the Act, saying that this manifesto promise will not be practical if we peg it to the 6-month rent law. So, Dr. Sapong, where do you stand on this?
Yes. Yeah, Didi, thank you so much. Didi, my view is that
Dr. Sapong, are you there?
Necessary help. Yes, I am here. I can hear you.
Great. Please go ahead.
I think the Rent Control Office should be frank and call for the help they necessarily may need, because practically as it is now, the law says that they should lead the tenant to inspect and then fix the suitable price. They don't have adequate staff, and tenants are unable to benefit from their inspection and the fixing of the considerate. I mean, they should try and abide by the law. If the current state of the law is not conducive for them, I think they should participate in the review ongoing and then help us fine-tune the law to suit current pricing and all those things so that they will obey. They shouldn't hide behind the fact that there is demand, high demand that's against the limited supply to abuse the law. We can't be doing that to ourselves, Daniel.
Dr. Smart Sapong, thank you very much for joining us. You want to say a quick word?
On the issue of the new Amendment Act, we have infected our opinion. Currently, the law is before Cabinet for approval. So our inputs are in there just to suit the current challenges in the rental issues.
Interesting, interesting. Yes. We'll be with you when the changes are effective.
Exactly.
You're live on the Pulse with me, Daniel.